Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. I wasn't supposed to be home yet. A client canceled last minute. Some family emergency they didn't explain. It didn't bother me. It meant I'd beat the evening traffic and get home before Sarah, maybe surprise her with dinner. I took the shortcut through the quiet streets near Riverside Park, where the trees leaned over the road and the air carried the faint scent of the river. Just past the walking trail, I spotted Sarah's silver sedan tucked into a narrow pull-off, half hidden by thick shrubs. It was a strange spot, out of the way, the kind you'd choose to avoid being seen. I slowed down without thinking, my eyes fixed on her car. Sarah was in the driver's seat, turned toward the passenger side, talking to a man. My windows were up, hers slightly open, letting out the low hum of their voices, though I couldn't hear the words. He was clean-cut, maybe a bit younger than me, with an easy confidence. Sarah laughed at something he said, not the tight, polite laugh she used with clients, but the warm, open one I hadn't heard in months. It was the laugh she used to give me when we'd stay up late, joking about nothing. His hand brushed her arm, quick but intentional, like it wasn't new. They didn't notice me. I didn't stop or make a scene. I just kept driving, pulling into our driveway like it was any other day. The house was silent when I walked in. I dropped my keys on the entryway table, the clink louder than usual in the stillness. Normally, the quiet didn't faze me. Sarah was often at work, and I was used to the empty house. But today, it felt heavy, like it was waiting for something. I stood in the kitchen, staring out at the backyard, the old oak tree we'd meant to hang a swing from still bare. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. A coworker, a lunch break, a misunderstanding. But Sarah had been clear that morning. Meetings all day, no breaks, she'd said over coffee. Yet there she was, 15 minutes from home, in a hidden corner with a stranger. I wasn't imagining that laugh, that touch. Something wasn't right. Sarah came home around 7 o'clock, looking calm, carrying a takeout bag from our favorite Indian place. "Hey, you're early," she said, holding up the bag. "Grab some curry." Traffic was awful, so I just came straight home. She kissed my cheek, the same quick peck as always, but it felt hollow now. "You didn't text," I said, keeping my voice steady. She shrugged, setting the bag down. "Yeah, my phone's been weird all day. No signal at work. Hungry." I nodded, and we unpacked the food, eating on the couch with the TV on, some crime show neither of us cared about. She talked about work, deadlines, a rescheduled call, a new project. Her words were smooth, convincing. If I hadn't seen her earlier, I'd have believed her. But I had, and now every sentence felt like a carefully placed lie. After dinner, she left her phone on the counter, plugged in, face down. A few months ago, I wouldn't have noticed. I'd never been the suspicious type. But now it stood out. Other things started clicking. The second phone she brought home weeks ago, calling it a work test device, never mentioned again. The new perfume in our bathroom, sharp and floral, unlike her usual scent. Her work trips, more frequent, with vague details that shifted when I asked. And now that man, that car. I didn't confront her. I wasn't ready for excuses. I needed something solid. The next morning, after Sarah left for a half day at the office, I called James, a college friend who now worked in private security. I didn't need to explain much. He got it. "Meet me tonight," he said. By 6 o'clock, we were at a quiet coffee shop across town. He slid a small device across the table, no bigger than a key fob. "GPS tracker," he said. "Put in the trunk lining. It's discreet, sends updates to your phone." I pocketed it, nodding. "You sure?" he asked. "I need to know," I said. He didn't push. When I got home, Sarah was in a good mood. She made stir-fry, poured wine, talked about planning an anniversary trip. It felt like a show, one I'd seen too many times. Around 10 o'clock, she took a shower, leaving her phone on the nightstand. It buzzed, the screen lighting up. A message, "K. Still thinking about today." My chest tightened. I snapped a photo of it with my phone. When she came out, hair wet, she smiled. "You okay?" "You're quiet." "Tired," I said. She didn't press. The next day, Sarah wheeled her suitcase to the door. "Off to Dallas," she said. "Client meeting. Back tomorrow." She grabbed her charger, lingered in the hallway. I waited, then slipped outside, popped her trunk, and slid the tracker under the lining. 10 seconds, done. I kissed her forehead as she left. "Safe trip," I said. She smiled and walked out. By noon, she texted, "At the office. Heading to Dallas with Jess." But the tracker showed her car moving southwest, toward Austin. I watched the dot on my phone, calm but focused. Whatever she was doing, I was going to find out. The trackers blinking held my attention as I sat on the couch. The house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Sarah's text about heading to Dallas with Jess still glowed on my phone, but the app told a different story. Her car was moving steadily southwest, cutting through small towns on the way to Austin. I didn't call her, didn't text to ask where she was. I just watched the dot. Each mile it traveled, peeling back another layer of the trust we'd built over 7 years. By 2:30 p.m., the tracker stopped at a boutique hotel just off the highway, a sleek place with glass windows and manicured hedges. Not the kind of spot you book for a quick client meeting. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the app, and made a decision. I grabbed my keys, a water bottle, and a jacket and got in my car. The drive to Austin was 3 hours, but it felt longer, the road stretching out under a graying sky. My mind churned, replaying the image of Sarah in her car with that man, his hand on her arm, her laugh. I tried to focus on the highway, the hum of the engine, the occasional flicker of a passing car's headlights. But every mile brought a new memory that didn't sit right. The way she'd started locking her phone last year, claiming it was a new company policy, the late-night email she'd answer in bed, angling the screen away from me. The weekend she came back from a conference with a new leather jacket I'd never seen before. I'd brushed it all off, told myself it was just life, just marriage settling into routine. Now, those moments felt like clues I'd been too naive to see. I pulled into the hotel's parking lot just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the pavement. I parked across the street, facing the entrance, and turned off the engine. The hotel was upscale but discreet, the kind of place that promised privacy. I checked the tracker again. Sarah's car was still here, parked around the back. I waited, my hands resting on the steering wheel, my pulse steady but my thoughts sharp. At 6:55 p.m., the glass doors slid open. Sarah stepped out, her hair loose, a light scarf around her neck. She wasn't alone. The man from the park was with her, taller than me, in a dark blazer. His hand rested briefly on the small of her back as they walked toward a black SUV parked nearby. She laughed at something he said, the sound carrying faintly across the lot. It was that same laugh, unguarded, familiar in a way that twisted something inside me. I raised my phone and took 3 photos, one of them walking side by side, one of her laughing, one as his hand touched her back again. My fingers were steady, but my jaw was tight. I didn't hesitate. I started the car, pulled out of the lot, and drove straight up beside them. The tires screeched as I braked hard and stepped out. Sarah turned, her smile vanishing like someone had flipped a switch. "David," she said, her voice catching. The man froze, his hand dropping from her back. I stepped toward them, my fists clenched, my voice low but steady. "Dallas, huh?" Sarah backed up a step, glancing at the man, then back at me. "I can explain," she said, her words rushed. "Explain what?" I snapped. "That you lie to my face? That you're here with him instead of at some client meeting?" The man raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. "Hey, let's just talk this out." I didn't let him finish. My fist connected with his jaw, a clean hit that sent him stumbling back, then down to the pavement with a dull thud. Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "David, what the hell?" She dropped to her knees beside him, shaking his shoulder as he groaned, dazed. "What is wrong with you?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "What's wrong with me?" I said, stepping closer. "He's sneaking around with my wife. And you're asking what's wrong with me?" Her eyes widened, but she didn't answer, just kept her hands on him, checking if he was okay. I took a breath, forcing my voice to stay even. "When you get home, you've got 1 hour to pack your things. After that, you're done. You don't step foot in that house again." Sarah looked up, her face pale, her mouth opening like she wanted to argue. Nothing came out. "I'll be filing for divorce," I said, my voice flat. "There's nothing left to say." She shook her head, tears starting to form, but I didn't wait for her to speak. I turned, got back in my car, and drove off, the hotel shrinking in my rearview mirror. My hand shook on the wheel, but my mind was clear. I'd seen enough. That night, I sent one text. Come after 11 tomorrow. 1 hour. I won't be there. She didn't respond, didn't call. I didn't expect her to. I crashed at a friend's place, a spare room with a lumpy couch that somehow felt more honest than our bed at home. I slept better than I had in weeks, the weight of uncertainty gone, replaced by something sharper, resolve. The next morning, I drove back to the house. Sarah's car wasn't there. Inside, her closet was half empty, her dresser drawers cleared out. Her jewelry, her makeup, her favorite mug, all gone. But on the hallway table, she'd left our wedding photo, the one we'd framed for our 5th anniversary. I picked it up, stared at the smiles we'd worn that day, then set it face down. It didn't belong anymore. By noon, I called a locksmith. The new keys were in my hand by 2 o'clock. If Sarah tried to come back, her old ones wouldn't work. As I stood in the living room, the house felt different. Not empty, just quieter, like it was waiting for me to decide what came next. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi, David. This is Claire. Can we talk? I frowned, thinking it was a mistake, but something about the tone felt deliberate. I typed back about. The reply came fast. Mark's my husband. The man you saw with Sarah. My grip tightened on the phone. Mark. The man I'd hit, the one she'd been with. I responded, where and when? I met Claire that evening at a diner on the edge of town, a place with worn booths and the faint smell of burnt coffee. She was in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back and no makeup, her eyes tired but focused. I've known for a while, she said, stirring her tea. Just didn't have the proof to face it. She didn't look at me as she spoke, her voice steady but heavy. They weren't careful. Hotel receipts, late-night texts. I started keeping track. She slid a manila envelope across the table. I opened it. Emails, booking confirmations, a grainy photo of Sarah and Mark in a car, laughing. I started watching after I found a receipt from a hotel in San Antonio, she said. Mark said it was a work trip. I didn't ask. I just started collecting. I flipped through the papers, dates and places lining up with Sarah's work trips. They were together, Claire said. Not just co-workers. More. I nodded. I know. She leaned forward, her voice low. Their company has a no fraternization policy. If we report this, with evidence, they're done. I met her eyes. She didn't blink. They built this mess together. We in it together. I leaned back, the diner's hum fading as I considered it. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about tearing down the lies, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hide. Claire and I stayed at the diner until the neon sign outside flickered to life, casting a red glow through the window. The manila envelope sat between us, its contents spread across the table like a map of betrayal. Hotel receipts, email threads, screenshots of texts, each piece of thread in the web Sarah and Mark had woven. Claire's hands were steady as she pointed out details. Overlapping travel dates, a shared company calendar with meetings that didn't exist, a photo of them at a restaurant in Houston, her head tilted toward him, his arm around her chair. I didn't want to believe it at first, Claire said, her voice low but firm. But after a while, you can't ignore what's right in front of you. I nodded, my eyes on a receipt from the Austin hotel, dated the day before. The same place I'd seen them walk out of, his hand on her back. We spent hours building a timeline, cross-referencing her evidence with what I knew of Sarah's schedule. My tracker data filled in gaps, locations she'd never mentioned, stops that didn't match her stories. Claire had access to Mark's work email through a shared login he'd forgotten to change. It was sloppy, almost arrogant, how little they'd try to hide. They thought no one would care enough to look, Claire said, her lips pressing into a thin line. I didn't reply, but I felt the same quiet anger. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about taking back the truth they'd buried under lies. By the time we left the diner, we had a plan. Claire would submit an anonymous complaint to their company's HR department, attaching everything. The photos, the receipts, the tracker data I'd pulled, and a detailed log of their meetings. The no fraternization policy was clear. Relationships between employees had to be disclosed, and anything hidden was grounds for termination. We weren't out for revenge. Not exactly. It was about consequences, about making sure they couldn't just walk away and start over somewhere else. "You okay with this?" Claire asked as we stood by our cars in the parking lot. I nodded. "Let's do it." She gave a small, resolute smile, then drove off into the night. The next morning, Claire sent the email from a burner account she'd set up. She copied me on it. The subject line, a bland policy violation report. The body was clinical, just facts. Names, dates, locations, evidence attached in a zip folder. No accusations, no emotion, just enough to let the truth speak for itself. I read it twice, my coffee going cold on the kitchen counter. Part of me expected to feel something, guilt, hesitation, maybe regret. But all I felt was calm, like the moment after a storm when the air finally settles. I didn't hear from Sarah that day. No texts, no calls. The tracker showed her car back in town, parked at her office, then moving to an apartment complex I didn't recognize. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. By Wednesday evening, the company's response came faster than I'd expected. Claire forwarded me an email she'd received through the burner account, an acknowledgement from HR confirming they'd opened an investigation. Immediate action will be taken pending review of the provided documentation, it read. I sat on the back porch, a beer in hand, staring at the stars as the words sank in. It was real now. Sarah and Mark's world was about to unravel, and I'd helped pull the thread. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet certainty that I'd done what I had to. Thursday morning, I woke to a knock at the door. I shouldn't have answered, but some part of me wanted to see her face, to know how she'd carry herself now. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Sarah stood on the porch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her face pale and drawn. Her phone was clutched in one hand, her eyes avoiding mine. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Talk about what?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her phone. "I got a call from HR this morning. They're investigating me." "Us." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Someone sent them evidence. Photos, emails, everything." She finally looked at me, her eyes searching. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I held her gaze, unflinching. "I might." Her lips trembled, but she didn't back down. "David, I lost my job. My career. Everything I've worked for." I shook my head, my voice steady. "You didn't lose it because of me. You lost at the moment you decided to lie." She flinched, her shoulders hunching like she'd been struck. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she said, her voice breaking. "It just happened." I stepped closer, my tone cold. "You made a choice, Sarah. Every time you lied, every time you snuck off with him, you chose this. Don't put it on me." She looked past me, toward the house, like she was searching for something to hold on to. "I didn't want it to end like this," she whispered. "You ended it," I said. "I'm just the one closing the door." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't soften. The man who would have reached for her, who would have tried to fix this, was gone. She opened her mouth, then closed it, swallowing hard. "Can we at least talk about this? Maybe figure something out?" I shook my head. "This house isn't yours anymore. You've got nothing left here." I turned, walked back inside, and shut the door, the click of the new lock louder than it should have been. Inside, I leaned against the wall, my breath steady but my hands shaking. The silence of the house wrapped around me, not heavy anymore, but clear, like a room aired out after being closed too long. I didn't know what Sarah did after that, whether she stood there, crying, or drove away. I didn't care, but I knew this wasn't over. There was still one more piece to move, one more truth to uncover, and I was ready to see it through to the end. The house felt different after Sarah left the porch, like it had exhaled a breath it had been holding for years. I spent the rest of Thursday morning moving through it, gathering what was left of her presence. A scarf draped over a chair, a half-empty bottle of her shampoo in the bathroom, a stack of her old notebooks in the study, small things she hadn't bothered to take. I didn't rush, didn't rage. I just packed them into boxes, methodical, room by room. No breaking things, no tearing up photos. It wasn't about anger. It was about clearing space. By noon, 3 boxes sat in the garage, labeled with her name in black marker. She could pick them up or not. It didn't matter to me. The house was mine again, honest in its quiet. My phone stayed silent all day. No word from Sarah, no follow-up from Claire. I didn't check the tracker either. There was no point. I knew where she'd been, who she'd been with. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a coffee, scrolling through the photos I'd taken at the hotel. Sarah's laugh, Mark's hand on her back, the way they moved like they belonged together. I didn't linger on them, just made sure they were backed up, then locked my phone. The evidence was already with HR doing its work. I didn't need to keep staring at the past. By evening, Claire texted, "Investigations moving fast. Both suspended pending final review." I read it, deleted it, and poured myself a whiskey. The company wasn't wasting time. A no fraternization violation was serious, especially with the paper trail we provided. Sarah and Mark's careers were unraveling, and I felt no guilt, only a steady sense of justice. They'd built their lies on borrowed time, and the clock had run out. I slept that night without dreams. The first time in weeks I didn't wake up with a knot in my chest. Friday morning, I drove to the hardware store, picked up new paint for the bedroom. The pale blue Sarah had chosen years ago felt wrong now, like it belonged to someone else's life. I spent the day prepping the walls, taping edges, laying down drop cloths. The work was simple grounding. Each stroke of the roller covered another piece of what used to be. I didn't think about her, not directly. But as I painted, I remembered the early days, moving into this house, arguing over furniture, laughing as we spilled wine on the rug. Those memories didn't hurt. They just felt distant, like they belonged to another man. Around 4 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another message from Claire, terminated. Both of them. Official notice went out this morning. I set the paint roller down, wiped my hands, and read it again. It was done. Sarah and Mark had lost their jobs, their reputations in the company shredded. I texted back, "Thanks for the update." Claire replied, "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. Was I okay? I wasn't broken, wasn't angry, wasn't even sad. I was just free. I typed back, "Yeah. You?" Her response was quick, getting there. I finished painting by dusk, the bedroom now a soft gray, clean and new. I stood in the doorway, the smell of fresh paint sharp in the air, and felt the house settle around me. It wasn't about erasing Sarah. It was about reclaiming what was mine. I showered, changed, and drove to the same coffee shop by the lake where I used to go when I needed to think. I ordered a black coffee, sat by the window, and watched the water ripple under the fading light. My phone sat face down on the table. I didn't check it, didn't need to. The tracker app, the photos, Sarah's number, I deleted them all, not out of forgiveness, but because they were weight I didn't need to carry. That night, I got another text from Claire. Mark moved out. I'm done with him. I stared at the screen, the words simple but heavy. Claire had her own ending to write, and she was doing it. I replied, "Good. You deserve better." She didn't respond, and I didn't expect her to. We weren't friends, not really. Just two people bound by the same betrayal, cutting the same ties. I leaned back in my chair, the coffee shop's hum fading into the background. The lake outside was still, reflecting the first stars. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But something lingered, a loose thread I couldn't quite place. Sarah was gone, her things packed, her job lost. Mark was out of Claire's life, their affair exposed. Yet there was a piece missing, a question unanswered. What had driven Sarah to this? Why had she risked everything for something so fragile? I didn't need her to explain. I doubted she'd be honest if she tried. But the question gnawed at me. Not because I wanted her back, but because I wanted to understand the fault lines in our life that I'd missed. I wasn't ready to let it go, not yet. There was one more step to take, one final truth to face, and I knew I'd find it if I kept moving forward. Saturday morning broke clear and cool, the kind of day that used to pull Sarah and me out for long walks by the river. I didn't linger on the thought. Instead, I brewed coffee, strong and black, and sat on the back porch, the new paint in the bedroom drying behind me. The boxes in the garage were still there, untouched, Sarah's name stark against the cardboard. I didn't check my phone for messages, didn't look at the tracker app I deleted. The need to know where she was had faded, replaced by a quiet determination to close this chapter for good. But there was still something unresolved, a shadow I couldn't shake. Not regret, not longing, just a need to understand why our life had cracked open so easily. I drove past Riverside Park, the same spot where I'd first seen Sarah's car, tucked behind the shrubs. The pull-off was empty now, the hedges casting long shadows in the morning light. I didn't slow down, just kept going to the coffee shop by the lake. I ordered my usual black coffee and took my spot by the window, the water come outside. My phone buzzed as I sat down. A new message from Claire. They're together. Sarah and Mark. Saw them at a cafe downtown. I stared at the text, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wasn't surprised. Affairs built on lies often clung to each other out of desperation. But it still stung, a faint echo of the betrayal. I replied, "Doesn't matter anymore. You good?" Her response was quick, "Better every day." "You?" I typed back, "Same." I sipped my coffee, watching the lake reflect the sky. Claire's text confirmed what I'd suspected. Sarah and Mark were trying to salvage something from the wreckage. But I knew it wouldn't last. Whatever they had was built on deceit, not the kind of foundation that holds up under pressure. I didn't need to see it fall apart to know I was done with it. I deleted Claire's message, then blocked her number. Not out of anger, but because our alliance had served its purpose. We'd torn down the lies together. Now we both needed to move on. Back at the house, I started sorting through the last of Sarah's things, the ones too small to pack before. A pair of earrings on the nightstand, a dog-eared novel she'd left on the shelf, a grocery list in her handwriting stuck to the fridge. I didn't linger over them, just added them to the boxes. The wedding photo was still face down on the hallway table. I picked it up, the frame cool in my hands. Our smiles looked genuine, frozen in a moment when we still believed in forever. I didn't feel sad, just detached, like I was looking at someone else's life. I packed the frame in the last box, taped it shut, and carried it to the garage. By afternoon, I called a charity to pick up the boxes. They could take what they wanted, the rest could go to the dump. I didn't need reminders of her scattered around my life. The locksmith had already done his job, the new keys a quiet promise that Sarah couldn't walk back in. The house felt lighter, like it was finally mine again. I opened the windows, let the breeze carry out the last traces of her perfume, and sat on the couch with a beer. The TV stayed off. I didn't need noise to fill the space anymore. That evening, I got an email from a lawyer I'd contacted earlier in the week. A draft of the divorce papers was attached, clean and straightforward. I read through them, the legal language stripping our marriage down to assets and timelines. It was strange seeing 7 years reduced to checkboxes, but it felt right. I signed the digital copy and sent it back, no hesitation. The lawyer said it'd be filed by Monday. Sarah would get her copy soon enough. I didn't expect her to fight it. She hadn't reached out since our last talk on the porch. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to say. As night fell, I stepped onto the porch again, the stars sharp above the oak tree. The question that had been nagging me, why she'd done it, what had broken in her to throw us away, didn't seem to matter as much anymore. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was Mark's charm, maybe it was just a slow drift we'd both ignored. The answer wouldn't change the outcome. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. I wasn't the man who'd trusted her blindly, who'd overlooked the cracks. I was someone new, standing steady on ground I'd reclaimed. Weeks later, I heard through a mutual friend that Sarah and Mark had split. The cafe sighting was one of their last. Without the secrecy, without their jobs to anchor them, whatever they had fizzled out, Sarah moved to a new city, started over at a smaller firm. Mark, I didn't care enough to ask about. Claire sent one final message before I blocked her number, saying she'd sold her house, taken a job across the country. She sounded lighter, like she'd found her own way forward. I kept the house, the new gray walls a quiet reminder of starting over. I hung a new picture in the hallway, a photo of the lake at sunrise, taken on one of my morning drives. It wasn't about erasing Sarah. It was about filling the space with something real. I didn't hate her, didn't wish her ill. She hadn't broken me. She'd just shown me I'd been holding on to something that was already gone. Now, I wasn't holding anything. I was just standing, alone, and finally free.